start with one that's top of mind for investors, and that's Sarepta. We saw how the halt in the shipments happened for Elevidys, and we know that you've taken steps to reverse that for patients. Can you walk us through sort of the transparency part of that? What exactly happened? Tell us behind the scenes.
Yeah, so look, I can't discuss any individual product, but we believe in regulatory flexibility. We believe in tailoring the regulatory process to the condition being treated. We believe in information so parents and individuals can make their own decisions. And we believe in serving rare and incurable conditions with, a bit of an eye on the fact that there are not great alternatives. So all of those things go into the regulatory mindset when we're dealing with conditions like Duchenne's muscular dystrophy or other conditions similar.
I know you've been really big on talking about transparency. That's one of the things that you've been focused on with the CRL letters. We know that's one of the things. In addition, I want to kind of talk about vaccines, because that's something where we've seen you, the industry looking at you as sort of holding the line on a lot of things. We've seen the mRNA approvals, we've seen the vaccine approvals. What can you tell the industry about what to expect in terms of the childhood schedule, adult recommendations, and how you're looking at future vaccines?
Yeah, great. Well, first of all, drug developers and pharmaceutical companies deserve predictability. And so that's why Dr. Vinay Prasad and I published in the New England Journal of Medicine a framework for COVID vaccine regulation, because it shouldn't be sort of a black box where products come up and then we just sort of make an on-the-spot decision on what we think is proper guidance for these companies. They should know in advance. In terms of the schedule, that's not at the FDA, that's set by the CDC. But in general, you have seen us go ahead and approve vaccines in high-risk populations. The booster shot in low-risk individuals is a bit of an unknown. About 15% of Americans got the COVID booster last fall. And so I think they have questions, and I think more research could help shed light on that for that group.
We did also see a bit of a difference in you definitely recommending that even for pregnant women, which is a high-risk population, and then days later the Secretary of Health saying that it wasn't required. How are you planning to sort of maneuver that?
Yeah, so we actually did not recommend it in pregnant women, but it was on the list of potential risk factors at the CDC. So when that was cited, people assumed that might have been an indication granted. So it was not actually on the label. But look, these are things people have questions about. Should your healthy 12-year-old girl get a COVID booster every year for the rest of her life? Should she get another 60 COVID shots? So that's really an unknown. That's a scientific unknown. Of course, it's a very polarizing topic. Some people say absolutely, hell yes, and other people say, look, we want to see more data, or we are concerned about the vaccine injury, which has been described now in hundreds of thousands of Americans. So, we're trying to take a very data-driven approach.
Speaking of polarizing and data-driven, I know there's been a lot of discussion around the FDA misinformation that's been happening, a lot of reporting as well about what's going on internally. So put it all together. How are you thinking about the agency, how to lead it, especially at a time where the science itself is also suffering from mis and disinformation?
Yeah, so Anjalee, you're absolutely right. Public trust in health institutions is at a rock bottom point. When we came in, a study in JAMA found that trust in doctors and hospitals went down from 71% of the public down to 40%. That's a 31-point drop just over the last 4 years. So we've got some trust we've got to rebuild. And so to do that, we want more transparency. We're releasing the FDA decision letters so the public can see them, drug developers can see them. We can give more predictability. We're modernizing the agency. We're trying to cut some of the idle time. And we're trying to address one of the biggest sources of misinformation from the government, and that has been the food pyramid. It has been bad information. We're rewriting the food pyramid right now along with USDA. We're going to end the 50-year war on natural saturated fat. We're going to talk about grains not just in whole, but also mention at least once that ultra-processed foods are not the same as whole grains with fiber, not stripped from the grain. So we are going to rewrite those dietary guidelines. I think that'll go a long way too in rebuilding trust.
I love that you're talking about food because we've definitely not heard as much of it. I know the last administration did start the dyes conversation. You've got that win under your belt. But this is also happening at a time where consumer trends have kind of been going in this direction for some time. We've seen that push towards more natural and whole foods. And so with that in mind, what more are you able to do? And talk to me about Big Sugar, because that's been, $7 million in lobbying, pushing back on some of these ultra high processed foods and others that have been supported through federal funding, through food programs for some time. How do you shift that as well?
Yeah, so I will just point out, because you mentioned in the last administration they started the conversation on dyes. Actually, no one was talking about it until Secretary Kennedy on the campaign trail with President Trump talked about getting the poisons and chemicals out of our food supply. So with 2 business days left in the Biden administration, they took action on one food dye, knowing the inevitable was coming with this big campaign pledge. Republican, Democrat, independent, moms, didn't matter what political party, showed up in high numbers to vote for President Trump on this very issue Secretary Kennedy championed, that is the Make America Healthy Again movement. And he really captured this interest in people to say, hey, why do we have 1,000 chemicals in the U.S. food supply compared to Europe? These chemicals are banned in European foods. Why does somebody feel better when they go to Italy and start eating foods over there? Or why do they gain less weight when they're in Europe and they're eating similar number of calories? So we took action to remove all 9 petroleum-based food dyes within weeks of coming into office, and that's really thanks to Secretary Kennedy's vision and leadership.
And then the sugar part of it, that's been something we've seen pushback in Congress for years. How do you plan on handling that?
Look, this is a topic where it's very complex. Generally speaking, there is a lower glycemic index with raw sugar or simple sugar than there is with high fructose corn syrup. And so when you talk about foods being addictive, these are things we have to think about. Remember, no one has been talking about the fact that food has been designed to be addictive, with food scientists designing food to be addictive. So when we have a crisis in our nation's children, that is 40% have a chronic disease and 31% have prediabetes or insulin resistance, it's not their fault. It's not. We have this sort of idea, and this sort of read between the lines in the medical textbooks, that it's really their fault. This is not a willpower problem. Food is designed to be addictive. It is very attractive with these vibrant petroleum-based food dyes. Studies have shown it messes with the mind of a developing child. And so we don't think that our childhood obesity epidemic is a willpower problem. We think this is something adults are doing to kids, and we want to take steps towards healthier options. That's why you saw the SNAP program in the Trump administration now have waivers for states to no longer use taxpayer dollars for junk food and for sugary sodas and other sugary drinks. So these are incremental steps. We're going to keep going. We saw another major food manufacturer say they're going to remove titanium dioxide after our petroleum-based food dye action. So we're going to keep going incrementally, and this is what voters voted for.
I also want to talk about women's health. I know you're big on that. There's been an increase in funding in that. In 2023 to 2024, $1 billion increase from venture capital alone. We've also seen funding over time, in part because of the pandemic. There was this focus on health equity, DEI. We've also seen a cutback in that. Not your fault. The NIH and other agencies have had to pull back on that or have chosen to. But that affects what comes to your door and what gets approved. How can we fix that problem?
So first of all, women's health issues have taken a backseat for far too long. That's why the FDA just had a roundtable on hormone replacement therapy for perimenopausal women, something that every woman should watch. Anyone who is close to a woman, loves a woman, knows a woman should watch that video. It is incredible. 50 million women have never been offered or refused estrogen replacement or estrogen plus progesterone when the body stops producing that natural hormone. The long-term health benefits are unbelievable, cutting the risk of fatal heart attacks by 25 to 50%.
But that's pretty niche. I'm talking about broader on the market.
Yeah, so there are a lot of these issues with women's health. Look, women's health has had a backseat, and it may be related to a past male-dominated medical establishment. Right. It may have been related to the fact that perimenopause was downplayed when I was in medical school. We spent like 2 minutes on it, and it was like, oh, some women go through it, but the symptoms are mild. No, 80% of women go through it. It's not just a couple years. It can be 8 to 10 years, and many of the symptoms are severe. And there are long-term consequences of not having that estrogen replacement. So on the NIH, when we came into office, was a mess. 14% of grants went to descriptive studies on health equity, not reducing health inequities, descriptive studies. The NIH had funded a lab in China that had been responsible, in my opinion, for 20 million deaths and $25 trillion with the COVID pandemic. And so it had needed a refocus. So the NIH number of dollars at the NIH has not been cut, despite what some outlets have been reporting. And that money is going to go to study root causes of chronic diseases. We've got to talk about school lunch programs, not just putting every 6-year-old on Ozempic. We've got to talk about sleep medicine and the quality of sleep, not just antihypertensive after antihypertensive. And we've got to talk about environmental exposures that cause cancer, not just the chemo to treat it. We've got to talk about food as medicine and the microbiome that is a central organ of health we're just starting to understand. So you're going to see NIH dollars flow into these root cause issues, and I think it's overdue. These have been in the blind spots of modern medicine. When you look at the microbiome, heck, half the antibiotics doctors prescribe are unnecessary. Those are CDC study numbers. And what's it doing? It's altering the microbiome in children. Now that alteration has been associated in a Mayo Clinic study with obesity and allergies. Why do 10% of kids have a food allergy or peanut allergy? We didn't see that 2 generations ago. So we've got to start asking what's going on. We're watching an explosion of chronic diseases in our lifetime that didn't exist in a generation ago. Why? And so those are the big questions you're going to see the NIH tackle now.
Final question for you. I know you made some news yesterday looking at avoiding elongating the opioid crisis in this country. Talk to me about that, because I know there's also a part of it related to supplements. And I think that's an industry that physicians are really big on finding some kind of regulation around. It's been kind of a wild, wild west for a while, and people are taking things without evidence. How do we right-size that and make sure that Americans are taking things that are trustworthy and healthy?
Yeah, gosh, I'm so glad you brought this up, Anjalee. So look, there's a vape store popping up on every corner in America right now. What is in those vape stores? I mean, we need to know. The medical establishment can't be hanging out in the ivory tower and disconnected from the streets. Well, 85% of the vaping products in there are illegal. And there's a derivative of kratom. You'll see the neon sign, Kratom. And what is that? First of all, most people don't know. But there is a synthetic concentrated byproduct of kratom called 7-OH. Sometimes it's called 7-omega, 7-hydroxymitragynine. It's an opioid. It's actually 13 times more potent than morphine in one study. And so you can walk down the street into these vape stores and buy an opioid. We don't want to have a 4th wave of the opioid epidemic. And so yesterday the FDA announced with Secretary Kennedy and the DEA broad action that we're going to take to move towards scheduling 7-OH. Our focus is not on the kratom leaf that's used in teas and other foods, but it's on the concentrated synthetic form that is very dangerous. Parents need to know, read our FDA report, watch that press conference Secretary Kennedy and the DEA and I had. We're very concerned about this. We can't get caught flat-footed again. We got caught flat-footed with cigarettes 50 years later, recognizing all the harms: cocaine, heroin, crack, fentanyl, prescription oxycodone. We can't get caught flat-footed again. Every parent needs to know what's in those vape stores and the addictive potential.